Good morning. My name is Jennifer DeMudd, and I am the Executive Director of the Manufacturing Growth Alliance, also known as MGA. We are a statewide membership-based organization that champions, serves, and advocates for Michigan's small manufacturers as we drive solutions that make manufacturing in Michigan the most competitive and prosperous in the nation. Welcome to part 2 of a 4-part series we are offering in October to acknowledge manufacturing and to support small manufacturers in Michigan. Our conversation today will focus on automation and Industry 4.0. The agenda for the next hour will be as follows. We're going to do brief welcome and introductions. We will then transition to a discussion between our facilitator and the panelists. Please remember that throughout the conversation, we encourage you to type questions into the chat box located at the bottom of your screen. Dan, do you mind typing in maybe a hello, good morning to everyone that's on the call? And then we will close our conversation today with a review and wrap up. Here are a few housekeeping items before I get to introduce you to our facilitator today. Please have your technology on mute. We are recording the conversation to be distributed within the next few days to all those registered. Again, feel free to use the chat box throughout the next hour. We'll try to get to all the questions today, but if we're unable to get to your question, we will make sure to circle back to you and provide a response in the very near future. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our facilitator for today's virtual conversation. Kristen O'Neill leads Automation Alley's business development efforts and is responsible for growth, retention, and strategic planning, some of my favorite topics. Kristen has worked in business development as a consultative Kristen has worked in business development and consultative sales for 6 years and has a passion for guiding companies through successful digital transformation. Before joining Automation Alley, Kristen worked in protective coatings as a technical sales representative and ISO lead auditor. She is a former member of the Society for Protective Coatings, Women in Coating Subcommittee, and was recognized in Products Finishing Magazine's 40 Under 40 class of 2016. Thank you, Kristen, for facilitating our conversation today. I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you, Jen, for that great introduction. Nice little shout out there. Kind of an overview. I am very, very excited to be here and to have the opportunity to jump into this discussion about automation and Industry 4.0. Before we get too deep into questions, I do want to welcome everybody to open your chat window and tell us a little bit about yourself. It'll help our panelists today really frame their answers and conversation and make sure we're all on the same page. So company name, who you are, where you're from, what your company makes, that'll really be helpful so that we can make sure we're gearing this towards a productive conversation for you and your business. I am very excited today to be joined by 2 panelists. I'm joined by Matt Childress. Matt's the Control Software Engineering Manager at Eagle Technologies. And Matt received a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering Technology from Purdue University. He has 13 years of experience in the controls engineering field, primarily in conveyance and assembly automation. So welcome, Matt. It's nice to see you today. I'm also joined by Chuck Werner. Chuck is Manager of Operational Excellence and Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt at the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center, or MMTC, 2 of my favorite subjects. Chuck has been a program manager with MMTC since July of 2016. His specific areas of expertise are Lean, Six Sigma, quality, all the fun stuff, and he is part of the Industry 4.0 core team. Chuck has accumulated 30 years of experience in manufacturing, mostly as a tier 1 supplier in automotive, 30 years of plant stuff, he told me to say. So that's what Chuck is bringing to the table. We're very excited. So welcome, Chuck. Good to see you as well.
Thanks. Morning, everybody.
I thought it would be beneficial for us to start with a shared understanding of Industry 4.0. So I want to start by fleshing out how we're going to define it today. And Webster defines industry, I'm kidding, I'm not going to do that. It's not a school paper, right? If I asked 50 people to define Industry 4.0, I'm going to bet money I'm going to get 50, maybe 48 different answers. And that doesn't mean that people don't understand it. It means it's different for everybody. And that can really create complexities and uncertainty as companies are diving into this Industry 4.0 journey. Broadly, super duper high level, it is physical meets the digital, right? And forgive me, I'm Italian, I talk with my hands here, you'll get used to it. What your specific Industry 4.0 strategy should look like, that is as unique as the DNA of your company. There is no formula for it, right? In a nutshell, Industry 4.0 is about leveraging smart technologies to optimize your existing process. Make what you do smarter, faster, more efficient. It can be predictive maintenance. It can be implementing cloud-based collaboration tools to empower your remote workers. It can be utilizing AI to sort through technical documentation, improve your quality control. It can be leveraging 3D printing to increase structural integrity of a part. I could go on for 45 minutes with a list of what it can be, but the goal is to figure out what your company does and how you can leverage these smart technologies to gain a competitive advantage, augment what you currently do. I spent more years than I want to admit in the protective coatings world. And I was doing Industry 4.0 and I had never heard of it in my life. I had no idea. I digitized my entire ISO quality management system and automated reminders because I didn't want to screw up, and it made my life easier. That's Industry 4.0. Right? I was leveraging smart technologies to help augment what I did on a daily basis and improve my repeatability. So it's just one of those things that can feel really bushy and inaccessible, but it's a very tactical thing that starts with what's annoying to you, what manual processes have also, are fraught with potential errors and human interaction mucking up the system. And that's typically a great place for companies to start as they're looking at diving into Industry 4.0. So with that, I'm going to get off my soapbox here and open it up to our experts. I'm going to start today with a question for Matt. How is automation impacting manufacturing, and what changes have you seen during the pandemic?
So primarily, automation usually helps our manufacturers get more with the same amount of people they currently have. That usually results in higher product throughput and better quality on the product they put out. As far as COVID, most of our projects take anywhere from 1 to 3 years from concepting through design into building before they finally make it out to our end customers. We haven't seen very much yet come through that has been affected by COVID, but we have had manufacturers express to us that they've had trouble finding people for certain positions because of the changing landscape that's been created by COVID.
Excellent. Chuck, what have you seen? You work with all sorts of manufacturers. Any guidance on what's changed for them during COVID and as we're sort of moving out of COVID?
I think a tolerance, you were just talking about, I call it the wacky things people do. But if you want to get into the Lean Six Sigma vernacular, we call it variation. And trying to, especially in COVID, in the current COVID world, we have to do things in a standard way. We have to be able to think and plan and be able to predict kind of what's going to happen, because it's when we start doing things that are unplanned or unexpected that things tend to go wrong. But it's really the same way. That's kind of been that way in business, right? The enemy's always been variation, and the enemy has always been things happening that are in one of two categories. They were either unforeseen or they were unreported. And then eventually it causes a problem for us. I think COVID has just made us maybe a little less tolerant or a little more sensitive to that particular environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I'm going to kind of jump in on this one as well, if you don't mind here, because one of the things that we found is COVID laid it all bare, right? All of a sudden, everything's out in the open. So I'm using collaboration tools to work on a specific project everybody can see and jump in. And no longer is it, I'm doing this project with my team and my group. Now everybody can see everything. And I do think you're right that that intolerance, sort of radical intolerance for variability or things that mucked up that process. It'll be interesting to see how that moves forward from here as we're all sort of transitioning out. As companies are looking at what they can expect as an ROI as they begin to implement automation into their plant. Chuck, can you talk about that specific ROI?
Yeah, so and the first thing is there is a return on investment for the various forms of automation that people are gonna implement. And the second thing I'll say is there has to be, right? We don't live in a world, we don't live in a world of free money. We don't live in a world where we can, run to the, as I call it, right, the money shelf, where there's bags of money that we can just pull down and throw at our problems, right? So we have to actually utilize that return on investment. But I think over the last, I'm gonna say last year and a half, there was a phrase that was missing from Industry 4.0, and I started hearing it as I would go to various meetings and I would speak to people. And it basically towards ROI is know what problem you're trying to solve. You have to identify what are you trying to get out of it, right? We don't bring the technology in and then try to figure out how it's going to help us. We have to know what our business wants, right? We have to know, am I looking for automation because I'm a small business? I can't find the employees, as Matt was saying, right? That's kind of prevalent everywhere in business. I can't find the right employees, or I can't find the people to start another shift, but I need to increase my machine utilization to increase my sales, as an example, right? Am I trying to improve the quality of my product by using some form of automation or some form of sensoring to make sure that my process is running and my machines are being run the way that they're supposed to run? So you want to identify that ROI and what that expectation is, and then follow that in accordance with, what's your business rule? I mean, is it a capital investment 1-year payback? Is it something that, when we talk about automation and robotics, typically we're looking for something in a 3-month, right, within a quarter type payback. I saw somebody implement machine monitoring just to see their utilization, and their payback was 2 weeks. But the big thing is just to know what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think that's a really good point about defining what problem are we trying to solve, and then figure out how to leverage technologies. Matt, I've got a quick question for you here. When we're looking at I4O technology trends at a very high level, what trends are you seeing related to those customer needs? And are you seeing any consistencies in what those needs are as your customers are defining them?
I think our biggest problem with Industry 4.0, or the biggest trend we're seeing, is that people don't know what they want. So they want Industry 4.0, but they don't know what it means to them or what they're going to gain out of it. We usually recommend to them they first come to us with a problem, what they're trying to solve, and they'll let us tell them what Industry 4.0 can do for them in that regard.
Absolutely. And are you seeing any common problems that they're bringing you? Anything that you're like, oh, I see this all the time?
It's usually based on root cause quality analysis. So
Okay.
a lot of manufacturers have problems with their process, right, that results in scrap that they'd like to get rid of, right? It's basically free money sitting out there, but they don't know what's causing it. So older systems lack a lot of feedback, and even if they do have feedback, they lack the data analysis to do anything with it. Where Industry 4.0 has the technology there where you can not only bring in data, but you can analyze it and present it in a way that really helps them, root cause why they're losing that product.
Absolutely. And Chuck, anything you're seeing as far as trend analysis with what those needs are as you guys really guide companies through that journey?
Yeah, we're actually seeing, I guess, too. I mentioned the use of robotics to try to get utilization. out of equipment and to make up for maybe the lack of being able to find employees or associates. And the other one is everybody everybody kind of went out, I'm going to say about 10 years ago, and bought themselves what we call an ERP, enterprise resource planning. It's a very high level. It's a very good way to look at your business as a value stream from start to end and kind of tie in the financials. But what we're seeing is that people are looking at this high level, how am I performing as a business? But what they're lacking or what they don't know is they don't have good visibility to what's happening on their production floor. And there is a form of automation. It's a manufacturing execution system, or what they call an MES. And we're finding a lot of companies just trying to get some sort of interconnectivity and just a view of what's going on real time on their floor. And then that kind of gives them the peace. We believe in, our inputs are, or our outputs are a function of our inputs as far as manufacturing. If I control the inputs and what's going on my floor, then I can predict the financial and what I'm going to see at the end of the month so that it's not a surprise. So we're finding a lot of companies that need to have machine integration, controls, and then also just a good MES that just allows you to see what's happening day to day. Am I winning, hour to hour, day to day, week to week?
Absolutely. Matt, I'm going to flip to you for a second here. So let's say I run a manufacturing company. We've got, 78 employees, under 100 employees. How do I even start to answer that question about what do I need?
It usually depends more on what product you're making, right? I mean, the device, the widget, whatever you're assembling, right, will have certain processes built into it that can benefit from having different, feedback, different sensors, different methodologies, MES system, right? It depends on how complicated it is, how many steps go into it, how many shifts of your production you're running can definitely affect it too. When you have different operators doing the same thing in the same station and getting different results, tracking down that information is really important sometimes. So I'd say it more depends on what you're making and less on how big of a company you are necessarily or how many employees you have.
Excellent. And Chuck, can you talk a little bit about the importance of leadership buy-in? So when we're looking at change management leadership and manufacturers are considering bringing in these new technologies. So I've identified my need. I kind of have a sense of my business model. Now let's shift to how do I get leadership buy-in and change management at the high level?
Oh, wow.
I know, an easy question, right?
Think of any change in your business, right? Think of, for those of us that went through the ISO and QS 9000 adoptions, IATF, TS, Lean, Six Sigma, any kind of continuous improvement. It all comes down. You have to have a top-down commitment. And you have to have what I call, so the first thing you have to have is consensus to the problem. You have to be able to define that problem. You have to know, if I want top-down support, it starts with actually, sometimes we have to manage up. We have to make sure that the management team understands what's in it for the company. What are we playing for? What is that goal? What is that target? And then once we're on board, right? So once we have consensus, then we have commitment. And at that point, our leadership for any kind of change, there has to be a clear plan. I don't know how many times I've seen any kind of a project, any kind of an implementation, any kind of an adoption. If there's no plan, as I call it, treat it like a project, not a hobby. And so there has to be that top down. Somebody has to be championing or sponsoring whatever it is we're trying to adopt. And that becomes your senior leadership. There has to be communication. Up and down, right? Just good project management skills is what I guess I'm gonna boil it down to. Treat it as if it's a project. Treat it as if it's a capital investment. Treat it as it is, so that there's actually a plan. And then always, all the way through, we have to make sure that the senior management is utilizing what we call the PDCA cycle, right? Plan, do, check, act at every single step, because the worst thing that can happen in an implementation is when it seems like the senior management is just shoving this change on us and they're not hearing about where it is going well or maybe where it's not. So we don't capitalize on benefits that may be unexpected, but a lot of times we just continue to push or repeat that same mistake. And the more we push, the more resistant people are going to be to that change.
I am so glad you said that. And we talk all the time about transparency, right? When you have transparency and communication, people understand. If I were to come to you and say, Matt, I'm going to bring in automation, and so tell me what you hate about your job. Oh, I love my job. I love everything about my job. I feel threatened, right? If I were to come to you and say, Matt, you are smart, you are capable, and I'm not utilizing you to the best of my advantage. And what I need from you is to do real high-level strategy stuff. I'm going to take some of the manual day-to-day work off your plate. That's a whole different discussion and a whole different level of empowerment. Can you talk a little bit, Matt, now that I've called you out and told you I'm changing your job, a little bit about what that empowerment or ownership mentality or communication looks like, sandwiching not only the top down, but also looking at that bottom up?
Sure. Obviously, having your operators engaged from the beginning is an important step into making sure that you're giving them what they need, right? A lot of times we work with companies where only upper management is involved, and without properly communicating with their worker, they're solving problems they really don't have or in ways they shouldn't be, right? Or making things less efficient, right? I definitely agree keeping the operator involved at all points is important, and making sure that they're trained is also important with new equipment, with new technologies, obviously, so they're getting the most out of them and getting you the most feedback on how well things are working that the product you've installed there.
Excellent, thank you. Let's jump into workforce. Speaking of that, so one of the consistent things we heard, my team in particular, as the pandemic hit, shifted away from everything that we had done and did solely engagement and outreach and connecting to resources, right? So one of the things that we heard a lot is workforce stability, workforce stability. This is my primary issue right now. Chuck, can you talk a little bit about how Industry 4.0, digitalization, whatever we want to call it, can help with some of these workforce challenges, and maybe dive into some of the consistent challenges you're hearing from a workforce perspective?
Oh, yeah, there's really a couple of them. I mean, the first one is actually just being able to find people and get people in. And then obviously hand in hand with that is getting the people in and having the right skill sets. And I'll tell you, one of the benefits, if we go towards the digitalization and the technology, a lot of times, one of the reasons that we can't keep a workforce and that we're seeing is that somebody comes in, and I'm going to use a lot of examples that I've seen in machining. There seem to be two types of employees in a machine shop. There are people that have been doing this for 15 and 20 years, and they're really good at it. They're what you would call, the artists, and they can program, and they're really good. And then you have this other bunch of employees that have usually been there somewhere less than a year to maybe 3 years. And we're finding that the turnover in those employees is really, really extremely high. The reason for that is because there appears to be some sort of a skill or a transition gap that they may be experiencing, and they don't feel that they're going to be successful. And if somebody doesn't feel that they're ever going to be successful at what they're doing, they move on. So technology can help us with that, right? Technology can make sure that our settings are the way that they're supposed to be. It can give us the information, even right down to just an SOP or making sure that we're doing things in an appropriate way. We can use technology to support and assist the employee in feeling like they're going to be successful and that they can do this. And we can actually bring, I mean, too many times you've got those people that's right, I've forgotten more about this job than you're ever going to know. And the reason for that is because we aren't really availing ourselves of the technologies that can help us to capture those best practices and capture that knowledge and find a way to translate that to the new people that are joining our team.
Absolutely. And So in that same kind of vein, and thank you for that, because I think you brought up a couple of really, really important points when we're talking about those workforce challenges that we know companies are having, right? That's a given. You'd mentioned those two camps. What does it look like from a training and engagement perspective? Are you seeing more companies bringing in new talent to augment or have a clearer understanding of some of these very, very high tech components that they're bringing in? Or are you seeing more growth from within and training and upskilling of existing employees, or hybrid?
I think it depends on the business. I mean, both approaches work. But you have to take stock of your business and where you stand. We've been in, small companies where the average tenure is, 27, 28, 30 years. And we have individuals that are very close to retirement. So in that case, we have to start thinking succession planning. Obviously, we're not pushing anybody out the door, but I mean, there are people that this is what they've been doing their entire lives, and they're very, very, very good at it. And trying to take somebody that's maybe in the last couple of years of their career and suddenly say, okay, forget what you were doing. You're going to learn all this new stuff, and you're going to be really happy doing it because it's mandatory happiness and everyone will have it. We don't want to do that, right? You can't force, so you have to kind of know what your business needs are. If I have the talent, take stock of your people. Get your people away from some of the dull, boring, repetitive type work, and see what aptitude and interest there is out there, and then feed that and grow those people from within. But if you're introducing a technology that's brand new to the facility, you want to make sure that you're importing at least some sort of subject matter expert so that people don't fail.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And are there any particular resources that you've seen or structure that you've seen work really well if companies are looking to help identify who in their current employee mix might be prime for an upskill in Industry 4.0 or new technologies?
There's a couple of things you can do. One is employee involvement and employee engagement, making sure that these people are part of the project. Figure out who the interested parties are and get them involved early and often to be able to see as it's coming in and train. But I think hand in hand with that, when you're picking a supplier or you're picking an integrator or implementer of the technology, you want to vet that person or that very carefully. You want to make sure that there is some sort of experience in teaching and training, and this should be part and parcel. Anybody that wants to bring a robot and drop it off in the middle of your floor and then run like crazy, pass them by, right? Make sure that there's any integrator that we work with, we have a conversation and we make sure that they can explain to us, what is your training plan? How are you going to make sure that this is successful so that it's not just a drop and run? And I think that's super important when we're picking somebody that's going to help us to implement and adopt those technologies in our workplace.
Great information and the importance of picking a good partner who will help guide you through it. We're going to change gears a little bit here. And Matt, I'm going to open this question up to you. We're talking about manufacturing like it's one bucket, right? We all know it's not. There's all sorts of different verticals. So are you seeing any specific verticals that are adopting Industry 4.0 better, faster, or at least are more receptive to it than others? You don't have to call any verticals out, it's okay.
For our industry, for our company anyways, the biggest push we've seen has primarily been from automotive, who in the past didn't have a lot of Industry 4.0 because most of their machines or technology was relatively old compared to some of the newer industries we're in, like battery technology or life sciences. But automotive recently in the last couple of years has really went full hog into Industry 4.0 for the most part. They're rolling it out from just about every company we deal with.
Excellent. Can I answer my own question? Is that? Yeah,
Sure.
It's cool. I'm facilitating. I can do whatever I want, right? Just to piggyback on that, one of the things that we saw that was surprising to me was food production. I want to say it was about a year ago, and I just started, I don't know, I like food, I like eating. So, and worked with a couple of robotics companies that worked in the food production space. And it was the same kind of thing that you were talking about, where adoption happened really, really quick, because what feedback we got is we don't have a bunch of legacy stuff that I have to sit here and figure out how to move in tiny little bits. We can kind of start from scratch and start fresh. Chuck, what are you seeing as far as vertical trends, or any particular types of companies that are diving into this both feet?
With the small to medium enterprises, it's been a little slow. I would say probably in the realm of machining, we're seeing a lot of automation. And the reason for that, and again, I think that's being largely driven workforce wise. I have somebody that is more than just two hands, right? They have a brain, they have the ability to look at things, they have the ability to do programming. And sometimes what do? We just stand them in a machine, waiting for that drill bit to be completed so that we can pull that one out and put the next one in, right? I don't need a whole lot of brain for that, right? So I think in machining, that's probably one of the bigger ones, and we're starting to see a real push in the realm of injection molding on process controls as well. There's so many things. It's a term that we call task saturation. We take an operator, and we want them to inspect the part, and we want them to trim the part, and we want them to handle the part, and we want them to do all these different things. And at the same time, we want them to only monitor these 32 different parameters to make sure that everything is happening exactly as it's supposed to be. If they miss that one thing, we're going to come out and yell at them and write them up. So we are seeing where a lot more sensory. I want the machine to tell me how it feels. I want the machine to identify when there's a problem so that the person doesn't have to try and catch everything that's coming at.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think it's going to be really interesting to look at this cross-pollination that happens across these verticals, and where that collaboration stems and how they can learn from each other and their own experiences. And I think, again, to your point, having those partners that have that experience across can be really beneficial for companies. Let's talk barriers. So let's talk problems. We talked all about ROI and workforce and all of this great stuff that Industry 4.0 can do. But there are still companies that are hesitant, that don't want to talk about it, don't want to think about it, or don't have a plan in place for it. Chuck, can you talk a little bit about any barriers that you're seeing for manufacturing companies in particular as they're exploring Industry 4.0?
Yeah, so we kind of talked about, right, the just not identified ROI, right? If I don't understand my business and I don't know what problem I'm trying to solve, and Matt said he's run into this as well, right? If the person doesn't know what their problem is, they probably have no idea what the solution is, and that's going to make it very hard for them to identify. So that one's kind of obvious. I'll tell you, the other one though is I got burned before. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And I went out and I bought that piece of technology without a plan, or I bought that system without a plan, or training or implement, right? Something went wrong in the implementation. And we never made use of it, or we continued to use our legacy systems, or we bypassed and shoved the piece of equipment or technology into the corner, and we've been ignoring it for 3 years. And that's going to make people really averse to go in and try it again. And we've found in working with a lot of companies and a lot of clients that seems to be the biggest one, is that we did this before and I didn't get anything out of it. Why would you ask me to write a check again?
Yeah, we've heard that same thing from smalls, bigs, and everything in between. If I bring this to my boss, you don't know what's going to happen. You're not going to be in there to give me cover in that meeting because we did this and I went to bat for it and it didn't work because of myriad things that were not in place, I'm not going to be the one to bring it up again, right? And that I think both of you making the point about identify your problem can be a nice way for people to look at how to have that conversation in a different way. So we're not talking about this whiz bang technology I want to bring in. I'm talking about this specific problem that I'm trying to solve. And oh, by the way, happens that this technology is going to help solve that problem. So taking it from that problem standpoint rather than, ooh, look at this fancy shiny thing that I want to bring in and stick in the corner. Mm-hmm. Matt, I'm going to flip it to you. Describe to me, take me on a journey of what a fully implemented smart factory looks and feels like.
Well, usually what they start, like the base level is tons of fancy sensors bringing in all kinds of data that, I mean, it's hard to even imagine unless you've seen it all, right? I mean, every sensor bringing in what temperature it's operating at, how good of quality it feels like it's operating at, how many cycles it's been in, right? Taking all that data, correlating it together, bringing it into a cloud database to store, analyze, and display to your operators in charts and graphs, bringing in likelihood of failures when product quality feedback is trending in a certain way, indicating that something is out of spec or a piece of tooling needs to be replaced. I mean, it's really just bringing in tons and tons of data and analyzing it and displaying it in a way that's easy for the end user or the customer to look at and understand and react to in a way that makes your end product reliable and easy to anticipate problems.
Excellent. I love how Chuck said, I want the machines to tell me how they feel. I love that. And it's so accurate, right? So Matt, you mentioned data, right? And one of the things that we've heard from some companies is, I am overwhelmed. I have so much data. My machines, I put sensors on, they're getting all kinds of stuff, and I don't know what's important and what's not, and I'm being buried under it, and I don't have the ability to parse through and find the valuable pieces that are going to help me. Can you talk about how companies can start to sort through and have a data plan in place as well as a technology plan?
I think that goes back to having an understanding of the problem you're trying to solve, right? What data you're trying to bring in. Obviously, there are tons of sensors out there with tons of data that to a typical customer, he might only need 1 or 2 points of data, right? So our first conversation with any customer is, what are you trying to solve? What problem are you trying to get rid of, right? And from there, we bring in just the data they need, and we format faceplates into your MES system, your data collection system, that only displays the information you need to solve the problems you're trying to correct, right? And so there is no clutter. There's no trying to wade through the information. It's all presented to you in whatever way you as a customer feel like best serves your interest and helps you solve the problem quicker with the least amount of confusion.
Excellent, thank you. Chuck, we're talking a lot about what we can do with this and all of this Industry 4.0 technology and how it's going to help, but where the rubber meets the road, what are the top benefits that, in your experience, companies are getting from bringing in Industry 4.0 technologies?
I think, so when I teach business development and business growth, and I'm talking to a client about where they can go and how they're going to develop, the first thing that I always tell everybody is, when you started a business, you started at, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know necessarily, and that's that realm of a business where I know if I made money last month, but I couldn't tell you why. Or I know if I didn't make money, worse yet, and I still can't tell you why, right? So I'm kind of a slave. The biggest benefit that I've seen in technology implementation for businesses is trying to get to where we say, right, we know what we don't know. So for example, we know what our main problems are, right? To get to that, as Matt called it, right, identifying that problem that we need to solve to grow and get better as a business. Um, I've been a black belt since 1996. So I was Six Sigma before it was cool, as I like to say. And before we used a lot of the technology, and I will tell you that trying to go from I don't know what I don't know as a business to I know what I don't know takes a lot of data and a lot of analysis and a lot of information. And if you've got people that are already busy and already trying to run a business, right? We're so busy working in the business that we can't find the time to work on the business. But if we want to improve, we're going to go out there and we're going to tell people that they need to, okay, operator, I know you're busy trying to make sure that that part that came off the machine was good, but here's what I want you to do is I need you to write down all of the information of how the machine's running and what the result was and how many you made and how many you threw away and what you threw them away for. And now I want to make sure that you do that and do that accurately and make sure you get it into the supervisor. Supervisor, I know you're busy, but don't worry about that. What I need you to do is look at the sheet and take a look at the information and make sure that it's right because you want your people doing it right. Now hand that to the admin who's already overwhelmed and have the admin put it all into the computer files and the Excel files and then turn it over to somebody so that they can analyze it. And then we can make it into a PowerPoint and then we can show it to everybody 5 days later and we can all react on what happened last week. The biggest benefit I'm finding really from the technology is the ability to gather that data. And as Matt was describing his smart factory, right? Having that information at hand, being able to look at it, being able to utilize that automated collection to figure out what really is important and what isn't important so that I can focus on the things I need to actually successfully run my business.
Excellent, thank you. You made it sound so straightforward and easy, right? 5 days later, I have a PowerPoint presentation. Just decent. All right, so I have one more question for both of you, and then I'm going to flip to some of the questions we've gotten in from the audience here. It's a three-part question. So if I am a small manufacturer, again, putting on my pretending to be a small manufacturer acting hat, we've talked a lot about the first steps of identifying the problem, but what am I looking at as far as a time commitment, a financial commitment, and how do I help build that business case? Matt, let me start with you on that one.
I guess it depends on how involved you're going to be as far as the financial commitment. Just setting up a basic database, collecting information you got from sensors you already have, a machine that you already have running, right? And you're talking low tens of thousands of dollars, and you'd have it up running, the data you need and be collecting, right, including the hardware, right? Obviously, the larger your system, the more information you're trying to bring in, the more complex the problem you're trying to solve, that money goes up, obviously, into considerably more than what we're talking about right now. But to start with, obviously, you can get your foot in the door for a relatively reasonable amount of money, getting a basic data collection system set up to at least store the data you already have, right? Make it easier for you to access and collect and use instead of having a guy on the line writing down a notepad when, you know, a press failed or, you know, a torque gun didn't work, right? I forgot the next stage of your question, sorry.
Timeline. I asked too much at the beginning. What's an approximate timeline?
Yeah, sure. Let's say that you know what you want, right? You basically have an idea what you want to bring in, and you come to us already understanding what you want to do, right? Usually we can get a database set up in, I'd say we could probably do in a month. Honestly, if you're really serious about doing it and you're, you know, not worried about any kind of effect it might have on immediate production, because sometimes we have to do testing on the line to make sure it's all integrated well, right, which affects your production. Typically, though, you're looking at, you know, 6 months from the time that you even think that you want something. You talk to us, we work out exactly what kind of problem you're trying to solve, what information you brought in, getting it quoted, you getting financial money lined up, and then us coming in and installing it.
Thank you. Chuck, I'm going to flip that to you here. Approximate financial investment and ballpark timeline for companies as they're starting to look towards Industry 4.0 planning.
Um, yeah, I hate to give the answer, but it depends. Again, it really, what are you trying to get through? I mean, if we're looking for something that's, an automated load, unload for a line, you're talking about, I'm gonna say maybe about 3 months. Um, I like Matt's estimate, on, right, if I just want to get some data collection going, we can probably do that much quicker. But again, that's going to depend on the machine. How smart is the machine? And we tell the story all the time, and I love calling them out when I see them because I see them everywhere. But I'll walk into a plant and I'll see a 5-axis CNC machine, and it's sitting right next to a 1942 Bridgeport. It depends on what the capability of the machine is you're starting with. Do I have to bring in, does it have PLC? Does it have SCADA system? What's the interconnectivity? But I think the important thing there, as far as, pricing is going to be different from project to project, prospect to, I will tell you this, you can't implement an ERP in less than a year. And if you have done so successfully and fully implemented it, call me. I want to come to your plant and see it. All the time I see people, it's going to take what it's going to take. Make sure that you know up front what that expectation is going to be. But it's going to be different for every project or everything that you're trying to work in. I don't want to just throw a number out there and then, look like a schmuck because somebody said, well, Chuck said he could do this in 6 months. And the person, I'm not going to be that guy. So I'm not writing my reputation. I'm just saying.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. And yeah, challenging because it does look different for everybody. And there are unique sets of circumstances across the board.
But have the milestones. That I will say. Have
Perfect.
milestones, have the plans, have the checkpoints, and front load. Your involvement as a business person needs to be front loaded in the definition of what we're trying to implement and in the identification of the right resources to help us implement it. And then it's just a question of whether you want to internally or externally manage the project.
Excellent. Thank you. See, I didn't hold your feet too close to the fire there.
No.
That was good. No, I'm just teasing.
I've been told to be careful.
Okay, so now we're going to open it up to some of the questions that are coming in, and I'm going to remind everybody we've only got about maybe 6 or 7 minutes left for those questions. So if you've been holding back, hop open that chat window and make sure your question gets asked so that we can get to it today. You can even put it anonymous. So flipping to, I've got a question, Matt, here for you. We have looked at, and this came earlier in the chat, but we looked at some ways that companies can get involved with Industry 4.0 technologies, some of the barriers as far as the perception of it being cost prohibitive. If we're looking for low-hanging fruit, is there a way that I can figure out what in my process would be a good starting point for me? Or any sort of touch points that I can take away from that?
Going back to our cost thing that we talked about a little bit ago is basically a base level data collection system is probably your first foot in the door if you already have a machine you already have built. If you're building a new machine and you're looking to just touch on Industry 4.0, the things we usually see manufacturers struggle with long term is usually involving torque driving and pressing applications. And just collecting that kind of data and being able to analyze it and access it easier is probably the easiest, most straightforward way to get some Industry 4.0 in a machine that you have without, running into a lot of costs with putting sensors everywhere and trying to analyze a whole bunch of data.
Excellent, thank you. Chuck, I've got a question here for you. We talked about upskilling and worker shortages and workforce challenges that companies have. How successful have companies been in taking skilled workers who are close to retirement and gathering that information and turning it into training programs for some of their younger employees, that sort of cross-generational knowledge sharing?
It depends on the approach. If we go out there and we say, okay, I need all your knowledge for this youngster who's going to take your job, we're not going to be very successful. But if we recognize our tenured employees, and we recognize that they are the subject matter experts, right? They're the ones that they may not be able to statistically tell me that this temperature means this is what the output's going to be, but they kind of have that feel. They have that knowledge, right? They can't tell me that 120 degrees is good and 125 degrees is bad, but they can tell me when it runs hotter, it runs better, right? So we have to start gathering that information and involving them. Again, it all comes down to employee involvement and involving them and letting them see what they're creating and see what they're working in an organized and a well-communicated way. And actually let them share in. If the only thing an employee thinks is that I'm just coming to take your knowledge so that I can give it to somebody else, I don't feel like I'm creating anything, right? You got to think about our employees. We're manufacturers. We make parts to put in a box to sell to a customer. And if we do it really well, we're proud of what we did. That creation of standard work, that transition or that communication of knowledge and history can feel the same as manufacturing, right? What are we doing? We are creating a new environment where people are going to be able to be successful doing what we've done for so many years. And if we feel like we're creating something and we see and hear in the benefit, we're going to feel that success.
Excellent, thank you. I have a question that came in here that I'm going to preemptively answer so that nobody has to be on the hot seat. It was directed originally towards Chuck, and it's, will manufacturers who did not adopt Industry 4.0 technologies eventually be replaced? And what timeline are manufacturers working on evolving to Industry 4.0 technologies? I have said once, if I've said 1,000 times, this is coming. And if you do not have a plan in place, the likelihood that you're going to be in business in 10 years is pretty low. This is coming. It is here. We all saw what happened with digital transformation. So now that I've taken the heavy, and you can feel free to jump on that heavy too, Chuck, but what are we looking at as far as a timeline? Is this something I have to focus on immediately right now? Or is it something I've got a year or two to plan for?
I will say, if you're not working on identifying the problems, and we've said this multiple times through this meeting, if you're not working on identifying where your weak points are or where your problems are, if you're not identifying what performances or what problems lead to your success or your increased costs or your failures as a company, if you're not working on that right now, I will tell you your competitor is. I'm not going to tell you that it's now or it's today, but I'm going to tell you there's somebody out there doing it now, and they know where their problems are. And I mean, we work with a lot of clients, and these clients, the smart ones, right, the ones that are looking forward, are taking those problems and looking for solutions, and looking for solutions in a world where we can't find people to just throw at our problems, right? So, I mean, I think everybody should be working on it now. And I would say over the next few years, I'm not going to tell you you're going to be out of business because I don't like being doom and gloom, and I'm going to do my best to help you not be. But I will tell you that you will be at a significant, within, say, a couple, 1 to 3 years, you're going to be at a significant disadvantage to competitors that have availed themselves, if you will.
Thank you. That's a much more, I might steal that. That's a much more positive spin than the doom and gloom that I sometimes end up pushing here. Say again. Oh, you're drinking.
I'm glasses half full.
I like it. So we've got, we're about wrapping up. We're about 5 minutes from the end here. So I want to kind of get everybody's final thoughts. So any sort of final thoughts from today, and then if you could go into resources that are available for small and mid-sized companies as they're starting this Industry 4.0 transformation. And Matt, I'll throw that to you first.
I'd say as far as resources go, most companies that provide products for Industry 4.0 will usually work with you to help you understand how their products can help you, usually free of charge, right? I mean, obviously in the end, they're trying to sell you something, but the idea to get yourself familiar with, where the industry trends are going or how these products can help you. Most companies that make database systems or MES systems or robots or PLCs can walk you through how the new technologies and, involved in Industry 4.0 can help your business for, basically nothing a lot of times. As far as trends go, I mean, like you guys said, I mean, Industry 4.0 is coming. And I feel like as long as you're paying attention to where your bottlenecks are, that you have them, and how you're losing product, Industry 4.0 is going to solve problems for you. So even if you're not interested in it or don't know what it is, it's going to be there to help you if you're simply trying to solve your manufacturing issues like you would do it any time before, right? So I feel like you don't really have to know a lot about it. Just know that you need to fix problems and work with companies that are more knowledgeable, and they'll help show you how Industry 4.0 can solve those problems for you.
Excellent, thank you. And Chuck, final thoughts and resources for companies looking to jump into this journey?
I'll come back to the final thought. I guess from our resources, as we've been traveling around, we're a manufacturing extension partnership, one of 51. So there's one in every state and one in Puerto Rico as well. But as we're traveling around the state, I'm going to start with the associations. If you have a manufacturing association in your area, this is a really good place to start because none of us is as smart as all of us, right? Benchmarking. The associations are going to have people who have already availed themselves of resources that are going to be able to share, resources and where to get help. The associations are also going to be where you're going to find businesses that have maybe already implemented some of the technologies that Matt was just mentioning. And they're going to be able to show you what worked for them, right? We can learn from successes and we can learn from mistakes and shared failures as well. And those histories are going to be where you're going to get that experience. I mean, obviously the MEPs, we here at the center, right? We boast that we can get to any manufacturer in 2.5 hours or less. I have data. But I mean, we can help, right? In hand, again, I agree with the integrators and the implementers and the suppliers of these technologies. They are usually set up on how they can teach you and how they can help you implement. But we can help those suppliers and integrators as well, because we can help you with the upfront work, right? We can help you define what the issue might be, and we can help you figure out the ROI that might help you get to that, but pulling the trigger and going forward and actually moving on the implementation. And we can even help to communicate with that supplier to make sure, okay, this is what we're looking for, or tying, maybe what we really need to sense, or what the important things are. And then on the backside, get help with the project management. I mean, unless you are a project manager or you have trained project manager, there are so many skill sets, including conflict resolution in an implementation and a project that we're trying to manage. Make sure that project management skill set is there in some way, shape, or form.
Excellent, thank you. And I'll piggyback off of that real quick. And I think having that collaborative partner-based approach is so important. So whether it is looking to MGA to connect you with partners and resources, whether it is hooking up with MMTC to look at where you currently sit, whether it's reaching out to us at Automation Alley to gain some critical Industry 4.0 knowledge, or whether it's reaching out to Matt and Eagle and saying, okay, I'm ready and I'm really looking for a connected partner. Vetting your partners, understanding your company culture and how they align with your company culture, and then upskill yourself too, right? Like reach out. There's so many resources available for knowledge sharing and knowledge transfer. And it does become at some level incumbent on all of us to combat that Dunning-Kruger effect of you don't know what you don't know. and start to have the take that step in vulnerability, not to go too deep into feelings here, but take that vulnerable step in saying, this is an area that I don't know anything about. I know I probably should, so I'm going to start to connect to resources. So if anybody on the call is interested in connecting with any of us today, please reach out to Jen and the MGA team, and they would be more than happy to do the introductions wherever you're at on your digital transformation or industry for a journey. Odds are we'll have a resource to connect you with. I just want to wrap it up today with gratitude. I am so grateful to MGA and Jen and Dan and the team for putting this together and giving me the opportunity to facilitate. I am so grateful both for you, Matt, and you, Chuck. Thank you for the discussion today and being open and connected and available and present in this. This can be a very scary thing for companies to start to navigate. And I really appreciate both of you taking your time and your expertise and bringing that to the table here. And thank you to everybody who tuned in, right? This is for you guys, and hopefully you found it to be a valuable resource. Again, as Jen mentioned, it'll be recorded. And so definitely, hopefully you took notes. And if not, you'll be able to retread on some of this stuff in the future. So with that, my time is done. I'm going to cede the floor and cede my time. And thank you again to everybody for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.